Welcome back to the channel, guys. We're down at our little quarter-acre property with our small little 6x12 greenhouse here. We've got all our market plants. Wanted to come inside the little greenhouse. We have a 60% shade cloth, maybe 60 or 70 possibly. We shade a lot of light coming into this greenhouse because this is simply a propagation and sprouting greenhouse. Heading on up to our little aquaponics box, we've got a few of our guppies. You might be able to see them swimming down there. We've got some creepy crawlies that had fallen in, and they're eating all the bugs and little flies that are popping up in our greenhouse here. We pretty well keep our door open. We've had our fan on and window open. It has been super hot here lately. We've been seeing upwards of 90 degrees, and it is totally unseasonable for this time of year in our zone. So we've had to deal with some extreme heat when we're expecting it to still be cool. So that really sent a lot of our crops to seed. A lot of our crops in our large 52-foot greenhouse went to seed on us. So we had pulled all those up. I'm going to do a video on that greenhouse and the process of what I'm doing down there to keep my greenhouse cool. Now, keeping my greenhouse cool with this cool water, this tank, and the black hose that basically feeds up, you can see this little hose running through a big pile of compost that has about a foot or two on top of our hose, so it really insulates it from the sun. So it's almost like a geothermal pile now because our compost has cooked and cooled off. So as that water runs through the floor, we're cooling all of these bricks because our black hose runs all the way up underneath my feet and basically just drops right back. After this fills up with all of this water, it will bilge down into our overflow tank. I've covered this system. I just wanted to run through all that because keeping the greenhouse cool and keeping a lot of these plants protected is very crucial for us because we're propagating for a profit. We are trying to sell all of the plants we're propagating. Like these here, we've got our currants, and these have been in here for about a week, and I bet they do not have any roots to show yet. We've had our hickasap honeyberries. This one's starting to throw off some leaves for us. We've got half a dozen or a dozen of those in there, and I plan to propagate more. And I'm trying those in soil because I really didn't want them to fail. Because sometimes I'll find with my woodier cuttings, they do not do as well in water as opposed to cuttings from like a soft plant like this tomato. And this is our tomato from a week or two ago. It's got two little rocks stuck in there, and that was just a pure cutting, and you can see all those roots because we have nutritious water, good medium, and cool water. Now this was the top to our plant that we had cut. I'm gonna set these, kind of gently knead them back in the water a little bit there. So we had this tomato, and you can see where I had cut from the top, and there was nothing left. If you look back to the last video where we showed this system, this has regrown and rebounded pretty well, and this is able to be potted in the ground now or resold. And that is all thanks to our shade cloth up here and our fan getting good ventilation. Like our walnuts are kind of dying back. I had these walnuts sprout up, and I tried to throw them in some water to keep them cool and keep them alive, but they did not like the transfer from soil to the water. So as you can see, we got some comfrey in here. I have a decent chunk of comfrey root inside this medium, just kind of doing its thing and expanding. So I will be able to propagate a few. This is our Bocking Russian comfrey. So just a little sliver of the whole root will regrow. So we'll be able to plot out a whole line along our fence line or around our apple trees, pear trees, peach trees, or any other berries and bushes that need any type of extra nitrogen. I wanted to show everybody these tomatillos. These had sprouted from just a fruit. So these were all sitting. These are big green tomatillos. And then we've got these nice tomatoes. These had sprouted from just a tomato that was left over last year. This is some type of heirloom tomato. I will have to wait and see. I will plant these all by themselves, but as you can see, I'll be able to pull an absolute ton of tomatoes off of this one little bundle that came up for free, and I just stuck it in our water until we had the time to actually pot all of those up into individual containers. Now we've had some of these basils in here for about 3 weeks now, and you can see the serious root growth off of that tiny basil. These were just basically little tiny cuttings that had pretty well thrown off a whole cluster of roots and are pretty well ready to be potted up. And that's just one difference I wanted to talk about and highlight real quick when you're propagating into soil or propagating into water. Now, when you propagate into soil, it seems to take a lot longer. And when I'm propagating into water, it takes about half the time as opposed to soil. But on the flip side, when you pot up your rooted plant that came out of a hydroponic aquaponic system like this, where you're just strictly rooting it as opposed to growing it all season in here, the plants seem to stress out if they have a lot of root growth. Like with this tomato here, these are probably ample roots to be potted up, and I will get these potted up soon here. I don't want to let them get much bigger than that. The larger your roots get, the more damage they're going to receive when you transplant them from water to soil. And being that they're all fluid and they are not root bound or anything, they are more likely to get damaged in that transplant. I really like to propagate with water and propagate with soil. I have absolute ton of propagations in this greenhouse. I have a bunch of cuttings sitting in my fridge that will sit in there for a couple days. We've got elderberries, josta berries, currants, and a whole bunch of other stuff that I really just can't think of off the top of my head. I have a whole bunch of mason jars half filled with water and a ton of cuttings, and I will leave them in there for a few days and then I will bring them out. Some cuttings that I take from the garden, such as basils and peppers and tomatoes, those go right in because they are not shrubs, they are not bushes or trees. When you're propagating your plants right into soil, they do a lot better in the long run with transplants because they don't have all those loose roots like when you're propagating in the water. You have a good solid plug that will form if you let the roots develop properly. I just wanted to touch on this subject because I'm always talking about propagating into water and recycling our systems and kind of reusing everything. But I do a lot of propagating into pots and into soil to get my plants going. I've got all my gojis, my honeyberries. My wife started this pineapple over here. Now, when it comes to success rate between water and soil, I would say they're both about 80 to 90% if they're done correctly, if you have the right amount of nodes and you take all of your cuttings correctly and kind of experiment so you know what you're doing for the next time. Now, if anybody's got any questions on any of these cuttings or anything I got going on in here, I didn't leave myself much room to walk through this greenhouse because I like to use this to keep it out of the wind and keep all of these plants from being eaten up by bugs while they're trying to root up. Our shade cloth is the #1 factor that allows us to get these little cuttings going. You can see the roots coming out of the bottom of that little fig tree right there. We have tons and tons of plants that we have to propagate, and we're creating our own food forest. And we're creating all of these plants to sell. So we are double tasking all the time. When you're planting, it's not always about the right now. We plant things that will be ready in 6 months. So if anybody's got any questions on rooting any of this stuff up or what I got going on, anything in this greenhouse, drop in the comments below. I will gladly get back to you.